After a brief career in animation, I decided to look at packaging as an idea because animation to me, while it was interesting, I felt that it didn't have the creative opportunities. There was a high degree of production involved, and I wanted an area where there was more creativity. Finding a large printer who had a job opening for package design, I sold myself in as an expert, having never designed a package before in my life. But one of the first projects that came through the door was Burns Foods. They were a Western Canadian meat packer, playing in a secondary position behind Swift and Maple Leaf and other major national players. And they needed something different. I had thought that the idea of total photography would be helpful to differentiate a product from all of the dull, pedestrian-looking line looks, color, simple type, small illustration that we saw on the shelf. So I thought if a package was totally photographic and you burned the brand out of the photograph and the variety copy out of the photograph, you would have a different looking image. Well, the result turned out to be very different from everything on shelf. Market share grew and started me on a belief that this idea of photo symbolism could be applied to many, many packages. Shortly after that, the Nestle company called me and said, "Are you the person who designed the Burns package?" When I said yes, they said, "Well, we have a problem with Nescafe. We're losing market share to our chief competitor, and we think that what you do could very well reverse that position." So I said, let's try that. So I looked, just as an example, here is what Nescafe looked like at the time. And it was a 13 share declining against Maxwell House 42 share and growing. And so that was, and that wasn't very exciting. This was from the 50s. But I decided that a different container, a different approach to labeling, and using photo symbolism to talk about putting a red mug of steaming coffee in a field of beans would be a different idea. And as this totally reverse share, overnight, this reverse share with Maxwell House. I had experimented with photography on packaging, and I thought that if I transferred that to architectural scale and put it on the walls or in banners or baffles overhead, we could send signals to the consumer of good food in an emotional way and totally transform pretty anonymous space. My first opportunity came with the Loblaw organization. At the time, in the early 70s, they were losing market share and having serious financial difficulties. Again, a radically different approach might help. If you decided to market a retailer brand like a national brand, like putting the president on television, making packaging that's superior to the national brand, pricing it 20 to 25% below the national brand, then you have a proposition. Now the customer doesn't have to decide to be inferior to buy it, but only the people who can't afford to buy it. All of a sudden, the middle class and the upper middle class, all of whom are still struggling to manage eroding personal income, all of these people now have an opportunity to buy the retail brand. Markets change and retailing follows the consumer as she tries to struggle managing eroding disposable income as recessions hit. In the recession of '73, the full photographic packaging that I had designed turned out to be a little bit off target. So working in Switzerland, I noticed that Carrefour had launched these produits libres, freedom from the tyranny of brands in France. So I took the president of Loblaws over to France. We met the chairman of Carrefour. He told us what he was trying to do. He had managed quality, to maintain quality, but he had created symbolic difference between what he was presenting and what everyone else was presenting. By then, everyone else was into full photography. So we came back, and Dave Nicol, who was the president, said, "Well, you've got to do that." And I said, "Well, our color is yellow," because we had convinced the consumer that yellow was the color of saving at Loblaws. It had been in all of the signs, all of the ads that talked about saving the customer money. So we did these bright yellow packages with just bright words on them, and created a mass of visibility on the shelf that really created instant awareness. The color yellow is a color that I have been interested in for some time, and it's not that I love it, although I do love it, but I think I love it as many other people do because of the physical optics of the eye. It is the highest visibility color. And so for years, packaged goods manufacturers would put a yellow price spot, which we used to call a violator, onto the package to say it's on deal. The package has been degraded to lower its price. So we put this yellow coffee package on the shelf, and the consumer made that the #1 selling item in the store. And that said, okay, we need to do more than one. We realized that private label may need to fulfill a whole different agenda. It needed to provide a quality alternative to the national brands. And fundamentally, the economics work this way. The national brand attracts people to the store by advertising in mass media, mostly television, because the attitude-changing medium, to build all these values around these simple products. Now, the retailer didn't have that advantage, so their packages sat on the dumb shelves, just staring at you and not telling you anything about them. So retailer-branded products were, in fact, poor cousins. At one point, he approached me and said, I have a very, very superior coffee formula from Louisiana, and I'd like you to make a little bit different package for it. Has to be no name, but I'd like it to be different. So I created President's Blend No Name Coffee, and it became the #1 selling item. Though that said, okay, this customer is willing to trade up. Now, what do? Everything's not a blend. So he said, find something. So I came up with President's Choice, PC. He was the president. It was his choice. He was on television telling the consumer about it. So it seemed to be a natural jump to use him and his personality. We even used his personality as the signature for the brand. As designers, we are charged with trying to make a difference for our clients' offering, whether it's a store, or it's a product, or a proposition of some kind. And as we look around at whatever the category is, we find that everything looks the same. Nothing's really bad, nothing's really great, nothing really different from each other, everything's the same, but all bland. So this thing that the bland seems to be leading the bland, and if we're going to stand out, we've got to be very unbland. And so I used more aggressive colors than people use. I use more aggressive shapes. I use bigger signage than people would use. Outrageous scale. Because if we're trying to attract attention, you can't just play everybody else's game.